The Night House, directed by David Bruckner, who's mostly known for his work in the horror genre like The Ritual, and the work he's done with horror anthologies in the past like VHS and Southbound. And this film stars Rebecca Hall, Sarah Goldberg, Evan Jonigkeit, Vondi Curtis Hall, and Stacey Martin. So The Night House follows a widow who begins to uncover disturbing secrets left behind by her recently deceased husband. This film starts off with a very fascinating but dark and ominous tone, as we are introduced to Beth, played by Rebecca Hall, a woman arriving home from her husband's funeral and is now alone in their house wondering what events or circumstances led to his death. And this is basically what the film is all about. You know, us following Beth trying to uncover her husband Owen's dark secrets. At least that's what the film wants the audience to believe anyway. So first off, just let me say, in my opinion, Rebecca Hall is an exceptionally skilled actress. And her performance alone in this film, you know, really allows you to sympathize with her character, Beth. I mean, she seems very bitter in the film. You can tell she's having a very hard time accepting everyone's condolences. Like, she knows that they mean well, but she's much more set on trying to seek an explanation for her husband's death because she feels like the man that she knew really wouldn't have done something like this. So she's very headstrong on trying to figure out what drove him to do what he did. And her refusing to accept this reasoning is what takes us as an audience on this really, you know, crazy ass psychological roller coaster while we watch Beth sort of figure out what Owen's been up to. You know, there's so much to pay attention to in this movie, and I'm sure I still missed some things along the way. And I watched this film twice already, you know, possibly even a third time I could count, just to go back through the film and to further dissect areas of the movie that I felt like I still didn't quite have a complete understanding of, and I still feel that way even now. There's symbolism all over the place, from certain changes in the color palette in some scenes to unexplained objects and enigmas that appear throughout the movie. And to top it off, there are several dream sequences throughout the film that constantly blur the lines between Beth's reality and her delusions. Also, Rebecca Hall's character has some great comedic relief in the movie as well. There's times where she's just fed up and tired of people feeling sorry for her situation or their lack of understanding that she just snaps on a couple people, and it results in some pretty, you know, funny ass dialogue throughout the movie. And, you know, she also drinks a lot to process the situation, but, you know, she's also understandably quite bitter in the film, as I've already mentioned, because she's dealing with a very tough time and, you know, she's just choosing to self-medicate in the wrong way. But that also adds to a lot of humor throughout the movie. There's also a good couple jump scares. I mean, I guess it's, you know, it's tough to have a horror film without a few jump scares here and there, but the ones here were actually pretty good. But I would say for the most part, the director, David Bruckner, he actually takes his time with this movie. I mean, he leaves you, the viewer, in a very sort of perpetual state of lingering suspense and leaving you feeling quite uneasy most of the time. And that definitely makes it a pretty creepy movie in that regard. But I have to say that one of the coolest and probably the most impressive things throughout this movie is actually the optical illusions that they use with the camera work. It's actually really cool, and I haven't seen a movie use a camera this way so often to express creepiness and making you feel uneasy and, you know, sort of building up those kind of thrills. They did a really good job with that. And, you know, these optical illusions are actually displayed all throughout, you know, Beth and Owen's home. You know, it reminded me a lot of those old illusions where you would see an illustration of an old woman, but, you know, it's also a young woman as well. I mean, you guys might remember what I'm talking about. I remember seeing a lot of these back in school, but I haven't seen one of those in a while. But it made me think about, you know, those and the POV art pieces you see sometimes in art museums, you know, like where you're looking from one point of view at like a pile of junk, and then, you know, you go stand off to the side and now you see like this beautiful image of something. It's really cool. But because of that, you know, I was very impressed with what they were able to accomplish utilizing these optical illusions as jump scares. It was very cool. You know, my only major issue with this movie is that although they tried to do something very original and unexpected, they sort of ended up getting entangled in trying to blow your mind as a viewer, that they sort of forget to come up with a good ending for the movie, sort of. And I can tell that they had some difficulties trying to wrap this movie up because, you know, the ending felt just a little off to me, but nonetheless, I would say that I still enjoyed this movie and I would definitely still recommend it and say that it's worth the watch. So I'm giving The Night House, and this was actually a very difficult rating for me because I had to go back and forth between two ratings for this film, but I'm giving The Night House an 8 out of 10. It's a very interesting sequence of events, creative cinematography, and some very solid performances, and it tries to use ambiguity as a crutch to weasel its way out, in my opinion. But The Night House releases next Friday, August 20th, only in theaters. So yeah, go check that out. Alright, so yeah, I haven't done one of these in a while, but I'm gonna give you guys my ending explained for The Night House and my interpretation of the film after a couple rewatches and doing a little bit of research to better understand this film. But also keep in mind though that a lot of this film is ambiguous, and the director himself, David Bruckner, has came out and said that he felt like the screenplay for the film was actually keeping secrets from him. And the way that I took that is that he himself doesn't even have a 100% clear understanding of the movie. So like I said, you know, keep in mind that this is going to be my interpretation of the film after a lot of rewatches, doing some research, and I also couldn't find anything out there right now. I mean, keep in mind that this film actually aired at the Sundance Film Festival 2020 last year, I believe, but I haven't found much information about these things at all. I actually tried reaching out to one of the co-writers of the film. I know that was a shot in the dark, but I still wanted to give it a try because I actually got responses for my first ending explained from the writer for Parallel. So yeah, it was worth a try, but I haven't heard back anything. So I think I have a pretty decent interpretation of what's happening for the most part. But you guys are more than welcome to give your explanation down below in the comments if it's something I missed or if you have a better understanding of what happened. Yeah, chip in, man. Chip in, because I'm pretty sure a lot of us still have a lot of questions. I still have a lot of questions about a lot of things in the movie. So yeah, let's team up and try to figure all this shit out together. All right, so I usually like to start my ending explains from the third act of the film, but there's a few things in the beginning of the film that occurred that I would like to touch on first that I feel like, you know, could use a little more clarification for some viewers. So hopefully you guys may find it to be very helpful. Plus I'll be jumping around a lot just to explain, you know, individual themes, symbols throughout the film, and like I said, you know, specific scenes that I felt like could use a little bit more clarification for some viewers out there, because I know I needed it. So hopefully you guys will find these explanations to be very helpful. Also, I shouldn't have to say this, but you know, if it hasn't been clear already, there will be spoilers ahead. So yeah, there you go. All right, so starting with the first thing. So the first night that Beth spends alone in their house is the night that the supernatural entity arrives at her home. We know this because we see the figure's silhouette in the glass door. We also see the gate to the dock swinging open and its footsteps leading up to her house from the dock the next morning before she leaves to go to work at the school. Now the ghost entering her home is believed to be a dream, but the alleged dream sequence is challenged by reality the next morning when she sees the footsteps and later hears the gunshot that the birds reacted to, might I add. Now the film purposely contradicts itself a lot in this way, by the way, by making you question whether Beth is dreaming or dealing with reality, but I'll just leave you guys to think about that. But this is just the introduction to the ghost anyway, that we believe to be her husband. So I just want to kind of walk through that part. Now from there, basically every other ghostly interaction happens while she's sleepwalking. This is confirmed by the fact that almost every time something supernatural occurs, she wakes up in a different part of the house. Now the second time she has an encounter, she sees her husband outside, sort of just kind of hovering above the lake. And I think that this is symbolic of the fact that this supernatural entity, this dark entity, is using and has always been using her husband and the image of him to get close to her. The next important scene leading up to the ending is the conversation that Beth has with her friend Claire and their co-workers when she's invited out for dinner to sort of just get away. They mention that she might be experiencing sleep paralysis, where her body might be asleep but her mind isn't. And Beth sort of disagrees and she says that she thinks that it's the opposite. And this is sort of like like another hint at things being reversed. But the big hint here that the dark entity has now found Beth again after her husband's death is that she mentions how he used to sleepwalk after he built their house, and now that he's gone, she's now the one who's sleepwalking. She also jokes about possibly infecting her husband Owen with her bullshit and depression, and how maybe that led to his suicide. But what's funny is that she actually did infect him in a way, but not with her bullshit, but rather with a malevolent spirit she brought back with her after she died. After dinner that same night, Beth also tells Claire how she was dead for 4 minutes after her car flew off a cliff when she was 17, and how she didn't see anything that's proof of an afterlife when she was dead. But she mentions how her husband Owen disagreed with her about what happens after we die, and I think this is because he was aware of the spirit that was attached to her but never told her. So yeah, you know, technically he did have proof in a way, but I guess, you know, he just didn't want to tell her about it. Now the only things I really want to get into is just to explain the Cardroia, the Louvre doll, and the meaning behind the reversed reality that Beth experiences. So first we have the Cardroia, which is basically a maze, and this is symbolized by the house that Owen built in the movie, used to create trickery and utilizing the women who favor Beth's appearance as decoys against the evil spirit as offerings to keep her protected. Because the spirit sort of grew an obsession with her when she died, and all this time has been wanting her to come back, which means, you know, to die again, and has been driving Owen nuts to send her back. And the Louvre doll is basically an ancient French voodoo doll used to cast love binding spells on people. So my guess is that Owen was using the dolls to lure in Beth's soon to be decoys, as I've already mentioned, to protect her and sort of sacrifice them. As for the reverse spaces like the one Owen was building originate back to Celtic traditions that were believed to date back as early as like 1200 BC. And they actually believed that reverse spaces could be used to confuse or weaken dark forces. Actually, the book from the film states that by distorting the identity and location of the subject, pursuing spirits could be satiated by false forms of sacrifice, meaning that Owen was keeping the evil spirits fed and fooled up until his death. Now for the ending and the meaning of Owen's suicide note. So Owen's letter said that, you know, you were right, there is nothing after you are safe now. I think his suicide note meant that he could no longer fight the urges to harm Beth that were being forced upon him by this evil entity. Also, he couldn't keep hurting innocent girls, that's why the last girl from the bookstore was the one he spared. And this ultimately led to him taking his own life to prevent himself from being influenced to kill Beth or harm any more women. And now for the very end, where Beth is being confronted by this evil spirit, and the evil spirit is forcing her into the Louvre doll pose, basically casting this love binding spell on her and attempting to get her to take her own life the same way it drove Owen to take his own life. But in this situation, she's able to resist the spell and fight back in this inverted dream state to wake up and return to reality. Here is where Claire swims out to save her, and then they swim back to the dock where Beth is still able to see the evil entity lingering on the boat in the lake. And here's the part where I personally believe that the evil spirit will ultimately never stop pursuing her. It will always pursue her, but now she is just aware of it, and hopefully that can aid her with fighting against it, or maybe it will give up because she is continuing to resist. All right, so there you guys have it for my ending explained for the Night House. Hopefully that was able to aid you guys with any confusing scenes or moments or themes throughout the movie. If you felt like my interpretation wasn't quite right, please feel free to go down in the comments below and write your interpretation. Maybe you guys can help out a lot more folks. Maybe I got close and you guys can, you know, clean it up a little bit better, or maybe I was right about some things. I feel like I definitely was, but like I said, there's going to be a lot of interpretations for this film. Also, I've already said this, and you guys definitely already know if you saw my first ending explained, but they are very non-traditional ending explains, and here I did a lot of jumping around. I know that. I just wanted to explain the things that I felt like were the most confusing. So if you guys do have any questions outside of what I've already covered, you know, throw them in the comment section and I'll explain the best I can, because I did some Google searching, looked around, and there's not a lot out there as far as interpretations and explanations for this film. So yeah, I'm more than happy to chop it up with you guys and come up with some things that I may have not covered in the video. And I think we can all aid each other in sort of trying to figure this shit out. So yeah, like I've already said, I'm more than happy to help you guys out and let me know how accurate you felt like my interpretation was. But there you have it. And if you enjoyed the content, you know what to do. Thank you for watching.